Hey, it's Rachel. I'm back with a garden update for June. I do these at the end of every month to give you guys a progress update on any changes or big activities in the garden. Some of you will already know I'm also posting updates in the middle of every month on the yield coming out of the garden that you see behind me. If you want to check those out, go to wellgroundedgardens.com and click on the backyard diet. For all those details, I update it weekly. Otherwise, you can just check out those videos here in the middle of every month. For those of you that haven't seen any of my videos before, let me ground you on where we are. I'm located in Southeast Michigan, USDA Hardiness Zone 6A. If you look at my whole gardening year here at a glance, you can see my frost-free days run from about mid-May until mid-October. We are currently smack dab in the middle of that in late June. You can see the garden here in the background, but I also created and maintain a digital twin of the garden. It makes it easier to explain some of these things conceptually. I'm showing it here viewed from the southeast corner. I've placed my perennial crops at the north end of the garden near my shed, as well as along the eastern and western edges, all around the perimeter. There's a total of 12 of those perennial crops. All of those have been planted, all of them are actively growing, but as of my last garden update in May, the only things I was harvesting as far as perennials were my asparagus, some mushrooms, and a few of my berries, namely honeyberries, raspberries, and strawberries. That is still the case, but very, very soon, I'm expecting and hoping to get blackberries and grapes coming out of the system. My blackberry canes are absolutely covered in fruit set, small, immature, not yet ripe, but definitely coming on, and my grapevines are also beginning to set fruit. By the end of July, when I do another gardening update, I hope I will be getting significant harvests of both of those crops. The bulk of the garden and the center of it is dedicated to annual crops. I have 23 annual crops spread across 10 beds. I did a much more in-depth video explaining the whole rotational plan for the garden, but basically I took those annual crops, I mapped their plant families, and then I brought that all together to see how many I was working with. I have a total of 9 plant families I needed to work across 10 years in the garden. I do try and treat the 10th year as a fallow year, where the majority of the gardening season there's nothing but cover crops growing in that bed to improve the soil. For the other 9 years, I designed the rotation you see here. That rotational plan resulted in the design that you see shown in the schematic here, and this is what it looks like in real life right now. As of my last update in May, I had planted almost all of the annual crops, and most of them were actively growing. However, I was really only harvesting salad greens and radishes out of the system. The few things I had not put in were my heat-loving crops, like melons, peppers, squash, and sweet potatoes. As of now, in June, those are all in the ground and actively growing. But the big update is that I finally planted my Buckwheat Meadow. I have a deer moat. These are 2 4-foot-tall fences about 5 feet apart. It's too wide for the deer to clear in a single leap, but too close for them to land in the middle and then take off again. And it has proven to be a shockingly effective barrier around the garden, which is great, but it also felt like a wasted space unless I did something with it. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to use this as a buckwheat meadow. I did this for 3 reasons. First, it gives me an edible yield. Buckwheat is a pseudo cereal or pseudo grain. It's technically a seed, but it's prepared like a grain. You can grind it up, you can make flour out of it, and it has the benefit of being high in magnesium. But I was almost more excited about its potential for attracting pollinators. I've used buckwheat as a cover crop before, and it has just done a tremendous job of attracting pollinators that then benefits everything else in the garden. I really liked the idea of surrounding the whole perimeter of the garden with this meadow attracting pollinators. And last, buckwheat is known for its ability to mine or concentrate phosphorus out of the soil into its tissues. This means that after I've harvested the grain off of this, I can cut off the stalks at the ground and put them in my compost and give a boost of phosphorus to all of my future crops benefiting from that compost. I'll quickly show you how I executed this meadow. I'm using a Jang Seeder to put this buckwheat in. I've been wanting to get one for a while. This project was finally my excuse to do it. It allows for really quick and efficient planting of seeds at identical spacing, using these little rollers to space the seeds out. I'm going to use this, I think, all the time now, but this buckwheat meadow was my first kickoff project for it. This seeder does require a really clean seed bed. This moat area was overtaken with weeds and invasive grasses, and I knew in order to plant a big field of buckwheat, I first needed to wipe out as much of that weed seed bed as possible. I have silage tarps, black on one side, white on the other, that I have cut to size for my beds. I use them all the time. I put several of those in place in this deer moat, overlapping them to create a continuous barrier, and I left them in place for the better part of a year to really kill off everything that was in that moat. I waited until we had rain in the forecast for several days, went through, removed those silage tarps, and then I raked all of the debris off of the surface of the soil. I went through with my bow rake and raked all of the debris towards the outer fence. I knew I was going to need to have an access pathway to get in here and harvest the grains. The reason I decided to put it at the outside perimeter was so that if any grasses start to come in and invade from the outside from our lawn, I'll see them quickly and can put a stop to it quickly, and really hopefully keep that buckwheat meadow fairly weed-free. I had to go through and manually remove some grass rhizomes that had not fully died back under those silage tarps. Between the raking and a little bit of manual removal, I was left with a really nice seed bed, as you can see here. I loaded up my hopper on the Jang Seeder with buckwheat, and I made multiple passes with the seeder, creating 6 rows about 6 inches apart. For those that are interested, I'm using a Jang roller type G12. That spaces them at about 3 to 4 inches in those rows, 6 inches apart. Should result in a pretty dense stand of buckwheat if I can get all of these things to germinate. Let me show you the handle on this thing real quick as well. The handle is designed with this little thumb screw to adjust and slide all the way from one side to the other. This makes it possible to stand off to one side while I'm running this and not walk directly on the seeds that I just put into the ground. When I get down to the other end, I'll loosen the screw, slide it the other direction, and come back walking on that side of it. And let me show you the finished product when I was done. It looked pretty good, much better than my usual projects. I did time this for a period of heavy rain because this much surface area is too much for me to manually hand water. The good news is our weather forecast has rain basically every other day for the better part of a week, and all in we're getting well over an inch during that time period. So I should, hopefully, get good decent buckwheat germination. That really is the biggest update for June, but there's a few other things I thought I would flag for you all. One is what I did in bed 10, the fallow bed. I had a pea, oat, and hairy vetch cover crop growing in this bed. I went through and terminated that as soon as I saw the peas were flowering. I have a prior video on how I do this. It's not especially sophisticated. It involves using a stick and a piece of rope to just flatten this out, kind of like you're making a crop circle, but a very boring rectilinear one. I then laid one of my silage tarps on top of those flattened out debris to thoroughly kill them off. I did leave the beans along the edge to continue growing up the trellis. So I was careful to tuck the edges of the silage tarp over the cover crop, but leave room for those beans. I'm going to give this another 2 to 3 weeks to thoroughly die off under that tarp, and then I will plant my fall and winter brassicas directly into those cover crop debris, and I'll just leave them on the soil like a mulch. Beds 1 and 7, they're my tomato, pepper, and edamame beds. I had extremely poor germination of my edamame, essentially 0% germination. I went back to elementary school science project days and put a damp paper towel inside a large gallon Ziploc bag, laid edamame seeds inside, and left that to sit and germinate. Only once I saw beans showing signs of active germination did I take those and plant them in the garden. It was a little bit annoying to check it every day, but it definitely resulted in much better germination rates, and I now have a nice row of edamame going in the garden. Bed 6 is that polyculture frequent access bed. I plant everything in here that requires either daily harvesting, pruning, or frequent weeding to make more efficient use of my time. A few things to note on this one. A few crops are going out. My mustard completely bolted and flowered, my spinach has bolted, my arugula has bolted and flowered. I leave those for a few days for the pollinators, but then ultimately I pull them up and give them to my chickens or throw them in the compost. Normally I would be reseeding right into those empty spaces to have a continuous yield of salad greens, but this year I'm going to be putting in a drip irrigation system in the next few weeks. And this bed in particular is going to have a different layout as a result of that system. Consequently, I'm having to essentially harvest it until it's empty, and then I will plant the fall greens all at once. The other crop worth mentioning that I'm taking out soon were my snap peas. I've had really nice harvests off of these, but they're definitely petering out and getting to the point in the year where they're dying back. I'm allowing the pods on those plants to remain now and to mature and dry up to save for seed for next year. As soon as those are ready, I will cut off those vines at the ground level to release nitrogen into the soil. That will be a nice yield for the other plants still growing in that bed. I did go through and plant beans along the base of the same trellis. They can start growing up and taking over that space as the pea vines are removed. I did have a very, very sad cucumber plant. You might have seen it in the May garden tour. I mentioned then I was going to have to replace it. I did. That is planted and growing and doing well. I also planted a tromboncino squash in one of the CMU blocks on the outside of these beds. That squash was always part of the plan. Ironically, it is not doing nearly as well as my unplanned squash. I have a compost bin just to the south side of my main garden entrance. I threw a squash in there that had started to go bad in storage and told myself a few seeds might germinate, but that's fine. The whole thing has been taken over, as you can see here, with massive squash vines. And I've just decided to roll with it, and I'll just get an extra benefit of additional tromboncino squash harvests. I'll move on to bed 9 to continue with the squash theme. This is my mixed polyculture bed with beans, melons, and squash in it. If you looked at it now, you could be forgiven for thinking this was a bed of nothing but mustard. But if you do look carefully, you can see that tucked in amongst all of this mustard, I have butternut squash vines, crimson giant watermelon, and accolade cantaloupe growing in this bed. I did seed a mustard cover crop into the bed a few weeks before I put in my squash and my melons to help disguise those plants from pests like vine borers. I've had squash vine borer damage in the past. It's not too bad here, but they are definitely present. My theory was that if I could grow those crops low along the ground and have them be covered by mustard, it would have two benefits. One, hopefully it would allow some scent confusion and make it harder for the vine borers to find those plants. I'm treating the big squash mess coming out of my compost bin almost like a trap crop. If I was a squash vine borer, I think I would go for that before I would go for anything hidden from view and from scent by mustard. We'll see if this works. The other benefit of mustard is that it attracts pollinators like crazy. I'm overseeding a little bit of mustard each time we have rain in the forecast to have nice successive waves of mustard in different maturities. I'm hoping that as these crops begin to flower and require pollination, there will be a continuous stream of mustard flowers available to attract pollinators to them. Very last update and a quick one, bed 2, my sweet potato bed. This was empty in May in the last garden tour update, and it has now been thoroughly planted out with my sweet potato vines. I did have to buy slips this year. Normally I grow my own, but I wanted to change types. I was growing Covington last year. It's more of a vining type, and it was taking too long for my growing season. I just wasn't getting a good harvest. Georgia Jet is more of a bush type, where it sets a concentrated harvest of tubers right near the base of the plant. I'm hoping to get better yields out of that given the short growing season we have here. But because I bought slips, I had extras. I decided to put those in my patio planter and just let them grow and tumble over the edges. I'm under no illusions that I'm going to get a bountiful sweet potato harvest out of this patio planter, just to be clear. My thought was, 1, they're free, might as well. 2, they do cascade kind of nicely, they're attractive, they're often used in planters anyway, so I thought worst case I get an attractive patio planter. But I'm hoping that even if I get a small tuber or two out of this, that would be enough for me to save to use to grow slips for next year. And I can take the harvest out of the garden and preserve it and put that away for human consumption and use the ones coming out of the patio planter, if I get any, for growing slips for next year so that I do not have to buy my slips and I can continue on with Georgia Jets in the future. Those are all of the updates for June. I hope that was useful and interesting. I will continue posting one of these at the end of every month to give you guys updates on how the garden is progressing. I hope you guys are doing well and that your gardening season is coming along nicely. Let me know if there's anything I didn't touch on that you'd like me to cover or if you have any questions, and I will do my best to answer them below. Otherwise, until next time, thanks.